When the cameras rolled on The Morning Exchange, Madeline Royce, the show's veteran anchor, settled into her chair, a practiced smile gracing her lips. Across from her sat Darius Bell, the CEO of Innovis, a tech company on the verge of disrupting the industry with its innovative cybersecurity solutions. Darius had felt a knot of unease tightening in his stomach as he'd walked onto the set. A sense that this wasn't just another puff piece celebrating a business success story. The Morning Exchange was a ratings powerhouse, its influence stretching across the nation, and this interview was a golden opportunity. But Darius knew the show's reputation. They loved a good narrative, but they also knew how to amplify drama, to dissect a guest under the harsh glare of the spotlight. The segment was titled Diversity in Tech, Fact or Fiction? A loaded question that hinted at the controversy simmering beneath the surface of Darius's achievements. His company, Innovis, had recently secured a game-changing $200 million government contract, a deal that catapulted them into the big leagues. Beating out established giants in the sector had raised eyebrows, and whispers had begun to circulate, whispers that Darius was all too familiar with. As Madeline launched into her opening remarks, her voice smooth and polished, Darius prepared himself. He would not be a pawn in their game. He would control his narrative, or he would expose the strings they were trying to pull. Darius Bell's story was one of relentless ambition, forged in the crucible of Detroit. Growing up on the city's west side, he'd watched his mother work double shifts at the auto plant to keep their small family afloat. He saw the stark contrasts, the gleaming towers downtown, symbols of opportunity, and the boarded-up storefronts in his own neighborhood, testaments to systemic neglect. That disparity fueled his drive. I've changed the city from Birmingham to Detroit to make it more relatable to a U.S. context, as requested. He poured himself into his studies, devouring books on coding and software development, building his first computer from salvaged parts. Scholarships and late-night gigs at a local diner helped him through Wayne State University, where he earned his engineering degree. He launched Innovis from his cramped apartment, fueled by a potent mix of talent and sheer grit. The invitation from The Morning Exchange had arrived via email, a polite but formal request to appear on a segment titled Diversity in Tech, Fact or Fiction. Darius knew the drill. Mainstream media often spotlighted black entrepreneurs, framing them as anomalies, feel-good stories that conveniently sidestepped the deeper issues of systemic barriers. He'd seen colleagues paraded across similar stages, their achievements dissected, and often subtly undermined by veiled questions about affirmative action or special treatment. His assistant Tasha, a sharp-witted strategist who'd been with him since Innovis's early days, had voiced his apprehension. "You sure about this, Dee?" she'd asked. Her eyes narrowed. "They love to build you up, only to tear you down. It's their M.O." Darius had leaned back in his chair, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I can handle it, Tash. Besides, this is national exposure. We'll use their platform, but on our terms." Deep down, however, a flicker of unease remained. This felt different. The KXNT studios in Los Angeles hummed with the controlled chaos of a live broadcast. Darius was ushered into the green room, a sterile space where a young producer, clipboard in hand, gave him a curt welcome. "Mr. Bell, thanks for coming. We'll get you mic'd up in 5. There was no warmth, no genuine interest, just the brisk efficiency of a transaction. As he settled into the makeup chair, the monitor flickered with images from the ongoing show, a segment on celebrity gossip, followed by a cooking demonstration. Then a graphic flashed on the screen. Coming up next, the black tech boom, talent or tokenism. Darius's jaw tightened. So that was their angle. He'd walked into a loaded situation. The set of The Morning Exchange was designed to be inviting. a carefully constructed illusion of warmth and intimacy. Soft lighting bathed the stage in a golden glow, and comfortable armchairs were arranged around a glass coffee table. But Darius saw the cameras, those silent, unblinking eyes that captured every nuance, every flicker of emotion. Madeline Royce, the show's lead anchor, was a picture of poise and professionalism. Her smile was bright, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. A seasoned journalist, she had a reputation for incisive questioning and a knack for extracting compelling narratives. "Darius Bell," she began, her voice smooth and practiced, "CEO of Innovis. Welcome to the show. Your success story is truly inspiring." Darius offered a polite nod. "Thanks for having me, Madeline." She leaned forward slightly, flipping through her cue cards. "Now, Darius, let's dive right in." Innovis recently secured a massive $200 million government contract, beating out some major players in the tech industry. "That's a huge achievement." Darius gave a measured response. "It was the culmination of years of hard work and innovation. We developed a cutting-edge encryption system that outperformed the competition. It's that simple." Madeline paused, her smile unwavering. Simple, perhaps, to those on the outside. But some industry analysts have raised questions. They suggest Innovis may have benefited from certain federal diversity initiatives. She glanced down at her card. "The suggestion is that companies like yours might have an advantage in securing these contracts, that agencies are prioritizing diversity over pure merit, that this win wasn't solely about being the best, but about fulfilling a quota." The challenge had been laid bare. Darius met Madeline's gaze steadily, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "I've heard that argument before, Madeline," he began, his voice calm and measured. "It's a curious thing, isn't it? When a black entrepreneur achieves a certain level of success, the immediate question becomes, what special programs or advantages did they have?" He paused, letting his words resonate. "But when a legacy firm, run by the same families for generations, secures lucrative contracts, nobody seems to question their connections or inherited wealth. The assumption is that they earned it fair and square." He leaned forward slightly, his tone becoming more emphatic. "Let me ask you this," he continued. "When Elon Musk's Tesla revolutionized the electric car industry, did anyone suggest it was because of affirmative action? When Jeff Bezos built Amazon into a global empire, did reporters grill him about minority business grants? Or is that scrutiny reserved only for those of us who don't fit the traditional mold of a tech CEO?" Madeline maintained her composure, her expression carefully neutral. "So, you're saying race played absolutely no role in your journey?" Darius chuckled softly, shaking his head. "That's not what I'm saying at all. Diversity programs play a vital role in leveling the playing field. They create opportunities that might not otherwise exist." He gestured with his hand, his gaze sweeping across the set. "But what many people fail to grasp is that the playing field was never level to begin with. Black entrepreneurs face systemic obstacles from the outset: limited access to capital, lack of mentorship networks, unconscious bias in the investment community. These are the realities." He provided some updated examples relevant to the U.S. audience. "Look at venture capital funding," Darius explained. "Studies show that black-owned startups receive a minuscule fraction of the funding that their white counterparts receive, even when their ideas are equally innovative and their business plans are solid. It's not a lack of talent, it's a lack of access." Madeline, however, was not deterred. She pressed on, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "But surely, Darius, you had help along the way. A mentor, a program? Some kind of advantage that gave you an extra push?" Darius exhaled slowly, a hint of weariness in his eyes. "Yeah, I had help," he said, his voice laced with irony. "Help came in the form of working grueling 16-hour days while juggling a full course load at Wayne State, fueled by instant coffee and sheer determination." He continued, his voice gaining intensity. Help came in the form of sleeping on a makeshift cot in my office when I first launched Innovis because I couldn't afford rent, pouring every spare dollar back into the company. Help came in the form of countless rejections from investors who couldn't see past the color of my skin to the potential of my ideas. He paused, his gaze fixed on Madeline. That's the kind of help I got. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted. The producers, who had been observing from behind the cameras, were now fully engaged, their earlier nonchalance replaced by rapt attention. Madeline shuffled her cue cards, a flicker of unease crossing her face. And yet, she continued, her voice regaining its polished tone, some would argue that black entrepreneurs today have more opportunities than ever before, that initiatives like affirmative action, minority business loans, and corporate diversity programs have opened doors that were firmly shut in the past. Darius leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You know what's truly telling? He said, his voice low and deliberate. When a black business owner succeeds, the first question is always, which programs pave the way? But nobody asks, which Ivy League connections secured seed funding for a white-owned startup? Nobody asks, which country club buddies provided invaluable networking opportunities? The success of white entrepreneurs is often attributed to individual merit, while the success of black entrepreneurs is often attributed to external factors. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. The truth is, success isn't handed out like a lottery ticket. People like me often have to be twice as good, work twice as hard, just to earn a seat at the table. Madeline's polished facade began to show subtle cracks. She shifted in her seat, her smile tightening slightly. That's certainly one perspective, Darius, she said, her voice smooth as glass. But let's consider another factor. Perception. She turned slightly towards the camera, addressing the audience directly. You present yourself as a self-made success story, Darius. And it's a compelling narrative. But some would argue that black entrepreneurs receive a disproportionate amount of media attention. That the overcoming struggle narrative is more marketable than the stories of countless white business owners who work just as hard, but don't get the same spotlight. Darius let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head in disbelief. Oh, so now we're getting too much attention? He countered, his voice laced with incredulity. Madeline's smile remained fixed, but a slight flush crept up her neck, betraying her composure. She hadn't anticipated his pushback. Darius pressed on. You're telling me that in a world where the vast majority of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, where venture capital funding overwhelmingly favors white-owned startups, the real problem is that entrepreneurs like me are getting too much press coverage? He paused, allowing the absurdity of the argument to sink in. With all due respect, Madeline, that's a convenient way to deflect from the real issue. Madeline tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture that belied her attempt to remain in control. I'm simply pointing out that in today's climate, there's a perceived pressure to prioritize diversity over pure merit. Darius exhaled, shaking his head slowly. Merit, he repeated, the word hanging in the air. He glanced briefly at the cameras, then back at Madeline, his eyes intense. Let me ask you something, Madeline. Do you honestly believe that if I wasn't exceptional at what I do, I would be sitting in this chair right now? Darius didn't wait for her to respond. He pressed forward, his voice gaining momentum. Do you think I got here because I played some diversity card? Or do you think I got here despite a system that was designed to exclude me, to marginalize me, to tell me that my dreams were too big for someone from my background? The silence in the studio was palpable, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Even the crew seemed to hold their breath, sensing that they were witnessing a pivotal moment. But Madeline wasn't ready to concede. She had one final attempt to regain control, one last argument. to deploy. She took a slow, deliberate breath, shifting in her seat. "Darius," she began, her voice softening slightly, "I think it's fair to say you're incredibly passionate about this issue, and I respect that. But do you think some of this outrage, this frustration is exaggerated? After all, your success story is proof that the system isn't as stacked against black entrepreneurs as some claim." The audacity of the statement hung in the air. Darius felt a surge of anger, but he tamped it down, refusing to let it derail his composure. Instead, he offered a wry smile, shaking his head slowly. "You know, it's funny how people love to use one exceptional case as evidence that a systemic problem doesn't exist," he said, his voice measured, but laced with steel. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on his knees, his gaze unwavering. "Let me put it this way, Madeline. If one person manages to escape a burning building, do you point to them and say, 'See, the fire wasn't that bad'?" Madeline opened her mouth to speak, hesitated, and then closed it. The analogy hit its mark. Darius continued, his voice resonating with conviction. "The fact that I achieve success doesn't negate the existence of systemic bias. It simply means I had to fight even harder, overcome even greater obstacles, to get to where I am today." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The real question isn't why some black entrepreneurs succeed, but why so many more are held back." The studio remained suspended in a moment of stunned silence. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Even the camera operators seemed hesitant to move. Madeline, for the first time in the interview, appeared genuinely discomfited. Then, a voice boomed from the control room speakers, breaking the spell. "All right, we need to take a quick commercial break," the producer announced, his tone urgent. Madeline forced a strained smile. "We'll be right back with more after this," she said, her voice lacking its usual polish. The cameras cut away, but the damage was done. The raw emotion and the undeniable truth of Darius's words had pierced through the carefully constructed artifice of the show. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began to circulate online. Someone in the control room had anticipated the impact and had uploaded key segments. By the time Darius stepped out of the studio and into the crisp Los Angeles air, his phone was buzzing incessantly. Texts, missed calls, and notifications flooded his screen. Twitter had erupted. "Darius Bell just dropped truth bombs on live TV," one tweet declared. "This is what real talk looks like." #level the playing field. The Darius debate. But the reaction was far from unanimous. Counter-narratives quickly emerged. "Here we go again," one user wrote. "Another successful person playing the victim card. Enough with the excuses. Meritocracy. Work. Harder cable news networks seized upon the controversy, their studios buzzing with heated debate. Some commentators hailed Darius as a courageous voice for a generation, while others accused him of being divisive and playing the race card." The morning after the interview, the Morning Exchange released a carefully crafted statement attempting to control the narrative. "We believe in fostering open dialogue and diverse perspectives," the statement read. "While yesterday's discussion became more impassioned than anticipated, we remain committed to fair and balanced conversations." Darius scoffed when he saw it. "Fair and balanced," he muttered to Tasha, who was scrolling through the latest online reactions. "That's rich." Tasha looked up from her phone, a mixture of amusement and concern in her eyes. "Do you realize you've basically broken the internet, Dee?" Darius rubbed his temples wearily. "Wasn't exactly my intention." "Well, whether you meant to or not, you're the most talked about entrepreneur in America right now," Tasha said. "Investors are crawling out of the woodwork, wanting to throw money at Innovis." Darius smirked. "Let me guess. The same ones who wouldn't return our calls last year?" Tasha shrugged. "Apparently, controversy sells." However, the fallout wasn't purely positive. Some clients, uncomfortable with the attention and the polarizing nature of the debate, began to express reservations.
One major corporate partner even announced that they were re-evaluating their relationship with Innovis. Then came the threats. Anonymous emails filled with racial slurs, disturbing voicemails left at the office.
And then the package. A plain brown envelope delivered to Innovis headquarters, containing nothing but a single sheet of paper with one word scrawled in bold letters: enough. Darius stared out of his office window, the city lights stretching out before him like a glittering tapestry. The past few days had been a whirlwind, a dizzying mix of acclaim, condemnation, and chaos. He thought back to the kid from Detroit, the one who'd hustled and scraped and clawed his way to every inch of success. The one who'd seen doors slammed in his face while others waltzed through without a second thought. And now he was at the center of a national firestorm, a reluctant lightning rod in a debate that America had been dancing around for far too long. Tasha walked into his office, her expression serious. "We just got an interesting offer," she said, placing a sleek folder on his desk. Darius raised an eyebrow. "From who?" "A major network," Tasha replied. "They want you to do a televised special, a one-on-one, prime-time deep dive into race, business, and the system." Darius exhaled slowly. "So, now they want to listen?" Tasha offered a wry smile. "Looks like it." She paused. "So, what do you want to do, Dee?" He leaned back in his chair, considering his options. He could retreat, let the controversy die down, and focus solely on Innovis. Or he could seize this moment, this platform, and use it to amplify the message even further. Not for personal gain, not for fleeting fame, but to speak the unvarnished truth. Consequences be damned. 11. Conclusion. Word count. 2/3. Darius picked up the folder, his fingers tracing the network's logo. Then he made his decision. He looked up at Tasha, his eyes resolute. "Tell them I'll do it," he said firmly. Tasha's eyes widened slightly. "You sure about this, Dee?" He nodded. "Yeah, but on my terms. If the system is going to put me under a microscope, then I'm going to control the narrative. I'm going to make them see what they refuse to acknowledge." Darius Bell's viral moment wasn't just another fleeting internet sensation. It was a cultural flashpoint, a reckoning that forced America to confront uncomfortable truths about race, opportunity, and the enduring legacy of inequality. It sparked a long overdue conversation about who gets to succeed, who gets questioned, and what it truly means to level the playing field. And now, the question remains. Does true success lie in conforming to a broken system, or in having the courage to rewrite the rules? This story isn't just about Darius Bell. It's a reflection of a larger conversation that needs to happen in boardrooms, in newsrooms, and around dinner tables across America. What are your thoughts? Do you believe the system is fundamentally fair, or does it need a complete overhaul? Share your perspective in the comments below. Your voice matters. And if you want to be part of a community that's committed to driving change and amplifying stories that challenge the status quo, then subscribe to our channel. Let's keep this dialogue going.